It's interesting. I edited that out from the interview you're going to see today. I was just telling my guest about technical difficulties. And I said, it might not be a rootwork show if there's no technical difficulties. So, probably fitting that this is the last show of rootwork for the year, and I'm having technical difficulties. Oh, well. At any rate, this is Rootwork here on Black Liberation Media. My name is Tandasizwe Shimaringa. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. Y'all let me know in the chat if you can hear me, because I can't hear myself. I see a couple of y'all are here. Y'all let me know. Let me know. Because if you don't let me know, I'm just going to keep running my mouth. You know what I'm saying? Thank you. Hey, Raul, how you doing? Ain't seen or heard from you in a while. Safia Aziz, Crystal, is that crystal clear? Okay, good. I'm glad somebody can hear me other than my self-talk. So again, my name is Tandasizwe Shimaringa. This is Rootwork here on Black Liberation Media. Today, I'm going to be speaking with a longtime community activist about why the Nguzo Saba should be seen as a Black job, a task for Black people to take up as a collective vocation. This is a pre-recorded interview, but me, hey, hi, I am live right now, and the after the interview airs, I'll be back to chop it up with a couple of folks in the chat if you have questions that I can answer, as long as Mr. Arthritis don't start getting on my nerves. So, as per usual, before we get into this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I say this every time. I have to say this every time because some of y'all be forgetting. Please like the show, even if you don't like it, just do it. It ain't gonna hurt. It ain't like you got to sign your name. Nobody will know. Like the show, okay? Like the show. Share the link. Okay, now people are gonna know if you share the link, but like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Subscribe to Black Liberation Media. We are over 50,000 now. Thank you so much to all of our subscribers. Please continue to spread the word. Subscribe to Black Liberation Media. Subscribe to Rootwork. Me with my little old followers. It would really help a sister out. If you believe in helping sisters out, if you don't mind helping a sister out, please also subscribe to my Rootwork channel. Like, share, and subscribe. And if you feeling, in the holiday festive mood and you got some change, some coins left over from all your shopping, hook a sister up. There's the Venmo, the Cash App, and the Patreon scrolling down at the bottom of the screen. Verona, what you mean no? What you mean no? Hey, Leah. Hey, Veronica. Hey, Zakia Alake. Hey, Terry Conley. Appreciate y'all coming through. So, I'm going to have this spirited discussion with this brother, Shujaa Baker, longtime community activist. Oh, let me say real quick before I forget. I talked about the fact that it's always, hey, Muhammad, greetings. Welcome to the show. I talked about the fact that if it ain't technical difficulty, it probably ain't a Rootwork show. Working on it, trying to get things together. I don't, right now it's kind of blurry, but my office has been painted. I got it blurred because my seat is all jacked up, and we're working on doing something about this glare. I don't want to take my glasses off because I ain't gonna be able to see nothing going on, even though it's right in front of my face. But we're working on getting rid of the glare, trying to bring you a quality product in addition to quality information. A lot of times we just throw stuff at people. Here, read it. But we care about you as our audience. We are fighting for the hearts and the minds of our people. So while we believe that much of the information that is presented here on Black Liberation is crucial and important, and it would be nice if we could present it to you in a way that's pleasing to your eyes. That's what I'm working on here on Rootwork, trying to get it together. So by January, we're going to have this glare all figured out. That's right. Purple Like Prince. Seize the way. We love the color though. That color is nice. Okay. First class. Who is Haywood Pittman? Do y'all know who Haywood Pittman is? 5832. Haywood must not know me. My delete fingers stay ready because I ain't got to get ready. But I tell you what we're gonna do. Before we get all into that, I'm gonna stop talking. We're gonna get into this interview with Baba Shujaa, talking about the Nguzo Saba. And of course, we do delve into Kwanzaa and some of the sordidness, that's the word I'm using, sordidness around the US organization in Maulana Karenga. And then at the end, like I said, they'll bring it back coming live. All right. So y'all just hold on for a second. And here we go. I'm speaking with Shujaa Baker, a Detroit native, a cultural historian, published author, and a design engineer with several decades experience supporting product and system design for many different projects. Shujaa is co-founder and co-director of the Afrikan Restoration Project, an African history and culture-based organization with almost 2 decades experience hosting weekly cultural events in Long Beach and Pomona, California, with periodic events in Los Angeles and the Inland Empire. Shujaa is also a small business owner with a product design and prototype manufacturing company called Virtual Design and Prototyping. His publication credits include his newest book, Building on the Work of Our Elders and Ancestors, and the children's series STEM and NIM and the 7 Principles, where he explains and advances his work to promote the Nguzo Saba 7 Principles as a Black job or daily code of conduct in the Black community and beyond. Welcome to Root Work, Brother Baba Shujaa.
Thank you, Sante Sana, Sister Tandy. It's good to be here with you.
This project, Nguzo Saba 365, actually launched earlier this year, and for a variety of reasons, I was not able to get to you, but we coming to you now, just in time for Kwanzaa,
yes,
2025. And also, like I said, we've had several conversations. You being here, even though you're a Detroit native, you being here in Los Angeles for a number of years, you know what people say about Kwanzaa, and you know what happens every year in December.
Yep, like clockwork.
Like clockwork. We can count on it. We're going to talk about that too. So knowing that you believe that the Nguzo Saba, also known as the 7 Principles, which most of us associate with Kwanzaa, right? You believe that they are principles for living. You describe it as one of the ways of thinking about it as a Black job for daily conduct.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
Why is that? And I'm going to add on to that. Not only why do you believe that, you are an engineer. You've written a book dealing with STEM. So, you know, we hear about the divide between the scientific mind and everything else. So explain to our audience, please, why you believe the Nguzo Saba must be principles for daily living, why it should be a Black job.
Well, thank you for both of those questions. I tried to take a couple notes so that I can make sure I answer them both, give it the adequate attention that it deserves. And I like that second part of that question. I'm really looking forward to responding to that. But to address the first part of it, why I believe the 7 principles should be treated as a Black job is simply this, Sister Tandy. Anybody who's familiar with the 7 principles, unity, self-determination, collective work and responsibility, cooperative economics, purpose, creativity, and faith, should know that if we practice those principles consistently, certainly beyond the 7 days of Kwanzaa, then we would have guaranteed improved outcomes. There simply is no question about that. So we believe that if we embrace them around Kwanzaa and then apply them beyond Kwanzaa to the point as mentioned of being like a black job, that we're obligated to fulfill every day, then a lot of the issues that we have would be resolved. There's no question about that. I believe we believe that we would then find ourselves approaching or becoming the best possible version of ourselves, through the daily and consistent practice of those teachings. And that by doing that, the record shows that when Black people are at our best, the world follows us, right? And in that way, we become the people that we've been waiting for to inspire the type of change that we work daily for, Sister Tandy. They're simple, they're universal principles. They have an African foundation in the context of the Nguzo Saba and in the context of Kwanzaa. But any people who are about the business of doing anything meaningful for themselves can embrace those teachings. They certainly didn't have their origin around Kwanzaa. African people have been talking about those very principles and more, related for centuries and eons, decades, millennia. So it's not like it's brand new. And the construction of the 7 principles, or the compilation of the 7 principles as a set, there's uniqueness to that, of course, but that doesn't change the fact that the principles themselves have application beyond Kwanzaa. In other words, they're not owned by anybody, So with regard to any issues people have around the holiday, certainly issues that relate to individual personalities and stuff. I mean, I think that it's a mistake to allow those things to stop us from seeing the value in applying those principles. And to the second part of your question about how all of this relates to this STEM focus, well, when we look to our ancestors and how things were done, when we look into the process of matriculation and the process that led to people going through the sacred teachings and all of that, those teachings began with the sciences. That was at the core of the teachings. And I can understand why. Now that I've been through it, I'll speak to that in a second. So before you got to the moral teachings, and the spiritual teachings, you were taught the sciences. That was at the foundation of it. And I can see the benefit in that because a rigorous study of the sciences is humbling to the intellectual ego. You can think that you are as smart as you want to be, until you start tangling with those scientific principles and that mathematics, and that's going to force you to conform to that mode of thinking. And we can have the greatest philosophical ideas that we want, and we can profess a divine knowledge through that, but it's not the same with the sciences. So I see a grounding in the study of the sciences that certainly would have been beneficial in the context of the conversation that we're having now, as it relates to the issues around Kwanzaa. And then so from that grounding, we then ascend to the moral teachings and the spiritual teachings and all of those things. And those things are ultimately what's reflected in my writing and in that first book. It's a discussion about STEM, but it's a combination discussion about how STEM should be developed and applied from an African-centered perspective with regard to the moral, teachings about how science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and manufacturing should be applied to help create good in the world, as opposed to, being used in the way it's done now to create destruction, So the text merges the sciences and the moral teachings and the principles, as a component of moral teaching to talk about how we should go about developing ourselves and reconnecting ourselves with our long tradition as STEM innovators because we know, that Black people laid the fundamental foundation for the STEM disciplines. We have a great tradition of being some of the greatest engineers the world has ever known. Some of our monuments, they still talk about not knowing how they were built, but the African people know how they were built. Even to this day, there's no question in our minds about how those structures were built. And we know that even those who deny, claim that they don't know, they do know. They just don't want to recognize. They don't want to give due credit for the high level of technology our ancestors had back then. So there's a direct combination, Sister Tandy, between all of this and all of these things, and we represent all of them in every aspect of the work that we're doing.
Mm-hmm. So this is the website,
That's one of the
STEM.com, or one of the websites. This is the website for the book, the children's book that you have written, STEM,
right?
Introduction to Culture, Adventure, and the Future.
And I should mention that the STEM series came about because the question became after the first book and the foundation for our work was laid. The question was asked, well, how do you reach children with this message? So we teamed up with a children's literacy consultant, Imagine Read Children's Literacy Academy. Shout out to Sister Tiffany Rashawn, who's been doing that work for a couple of decades. She's deeply committed to children's literacy and cultural grounding, supplementing public school education, and giving our children that extra knowledge that they need. So I'm not a children's writer. I, recognize the limits of my knowledge, went out and found somebody who does that, and she was instrumental in helping us take the work that we had developed for adults and package it in this series, STEM, for children. And, it's targeted at children, but it's also for the adults because the adults decide what the children have access to. So, we're hoping that the adults will take some time to read these stories with their children as well. And, so that's where, and we have a series of different cultural adventures where the stories progress from the intro, the book that you showed on the screen, STEM and the seven principles. That's the intro. We then have what we call a series of cultural adventures where STEM engages different Black occasions. And we use those different Black occasions to link the seven principles with Black occasions beyond Kwanzaa. So, for example, there's the second book in the series is Juneteenth, STEM and the seven principles, right? Mm-hmm. The third book is Labor Day, STEM and the seven principles. And of course, we have Kwanzaa, STEM and the seven principles. And we got a few more planned for next year so that we can continue expanding that effort to apply the seven principles beyond Kwanzaa and to reach our children, with this important message.
Okay. Thank you for that. Thank you for that information. But I want to go back. We talk about the fact that the seven principles are not only universal, they are ancient to African people. We talk about the fact that the sciences are ancient to African people. However, and I won't call this the elephant in the room, but let's get down to this. Let's get down to this. These are ancient principles that African people have always known, but they've been reintroduced to us through a particular context. And that context has a lot of baggage and a lot of history. And I'm speaking of Maulana Karinga and the US organization. So there are those who we know don't want anything to do whatsoever with Nguzo Saba, with Kwanzaa. Some folks don't want anything to do with anything African, period, because of how they were introduced to it via the US organization, via Maulana Karinga, via Kwanzaa, etc. And so my question to you would be, then, if these are African principles that predate all of this, but they've been given to us through this context of Kiswahili as an example, Nguzo Saba, Umoja, Ujima, Kujichagulia, Ujima, All of these are Kiswahili terms. Why utilize this in this day and time?
I think the question is why not, to be perfectly honest.
Mm-hmm.
And because for me, the question, the central question is always, you know, in terms of how I move, is always, how does it benefit Black people, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I was approached, and when I learned about this, you know, because I must admit, I'm from Detroit, so
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know all of the history about this before I got involved in it, you know. And I learned a very critical lesson in that, to make sure that I know all of the critical details about anything, you know, before I get involved, you know. But I didn't know all of these details. I learned about this when I was actually, after I had become active with the US organization. I was sitting in an organization meeting and
Mm-hmm.
learned about some of these negative things that are said about Dr. Karenga around the holiday and everything. And then, because I grew up in Detroit, on the Lower East Side of Detroit, the hood part of Detroit, you know, and I came up I was born in the late 60s, you know, came up in the 70s. So I came up during the era when we had Panthers in our neighborhood, you know, that were visible and active. And some of my earliest memories are of people in the neighborhood not calling the police when something went down, but, you know, they called the Panthers, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I grew up with, I wasn't one of those people who tried to become a Panther or anything like that, or tried to emulate them, but I had a consciousness as a young person, you know, from the, you know, an awareness of what was happening around me. So I had a deep appreciation for, you know, the Panthers and things. And then when I heard the claims that were made regarding Dr. Karenga and the Panthers, that was so distressing to me while I sat in an US organization meeting, as a matter of fact. It was so
Mm-hmm.
distressing to me that I almost got up and walked out of the meeting, never to return, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm thankful that I calmed myself. And because I realized that if I get up and walk out now, well, I'm gone forever. You know, there's no turning back, you know, if I get up and walk out. So I calmed myself, and I decided that instead of, you know, having this instantaneous emotional overreaction to it, I'm going to do what I do, which is look into stuff, you know, research, find out for myself, you know, don't just act on what has been said, you know, one perspective on it, dig into it, find out what's being said, find out who's saying it, find out if I agree with it, you know, that kind of thing. And I'm thankful that I did, because one of the things that I found immediately was that one of the primary sources for the things that I was concerned about regarding the Black Panthers, one of the primary sources for that was a man who is a professed agent provocateur, and you know, he's being quoted constantly, and you know, as an authority on this, as if the things that he's saying can be trusted when he's on the record
Who's
as a
this? Who's this you're speaking of?
Louis Sackwood.
Oh,
Um,
okay. There's Tackwood. Yeah, there's that. Mm-hmm.
glass
But
glass
there are other sources also.
Yes, indeed.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm seeing I saw that came up first because it was one of the most widely quoted, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then, as you say, there are other sources. Um, what ultimately settled it for me was in 2009. Bastards of the Party came out.
Mm-hmm.
I was involved with the US organization at the time when Bastards of the Party came out. So just like I was in a meeting, you know, when I learned about this, I was in a meeting when the discussion about Bastards of the Party came up. So
Mm-hmm.
um, I couldn't wait to see, you know, that film. I heard about it there. So I went and saw the film and deeply appreciated the context of it as it related to that conflict between us and the Panthers, and the way brother Clebone Shahid, I think he goes by Shahid now. I want to respect that.
Mm-hmm.
The way he did something similar to what I was doing, you know,
Mm-hmm.
or what I had done. He decided that, I mean, he had grown up in LA, so he was saturated with this where I hadn't been, and talked about how he had believed this, all his life. He had been raised to believe that stuff, and he saw Karenga as this villain, because of it. And he went on this fact-finding mission to find out what was really going on there. And he got to Geronimo Pratt, Geronimo Jijaga, had him on film in that movie, saying that all of these things that had been said about Karenga in the context of that conflict were, what was his exact quote? I can't remember his exact quote, but he absolutely dismissed all of that as being reflective of, or being part and parcel to the counterintelligence program. And I had concluded, something similar for the most part. That's not to say that there weren't mistakes made and all of that kind of stuff, but through my research and through this film, it became clear that much of that was just part of the effort to divide and conquer us. So I became troubled that was still going on today. And the first target of my frustration was Dr. Karenga himself. I'm like, how is this still going on? How come this hasn't been resolved? And said to him particularly because he has translated these sacred texts. He's regarded as this as having the foremost body of knowledge, one of the people to have foremost body of knowledge on ancient African ethics, Kemetic ethics and things like that. So I'm looking at him like, well, how come this hasn't been resolved? And there was effort then. I was involved in it, and others were involved in it, and then there was ultimately a peace treaty that was signed between us and the San Diego chapter. I don't know much about that.
Let me jump in real quick because it's a lot that's being rolled into. Let me just do some, I hate that word, delineation real quick. There are those who believe that Maulana Karenga is an agent. I am not one of those, only because I'm not 100% sure. There are those that believe he had a direct hand in the murder of John Huggins and Bunchy Carter at UCLA. From what I have seen, an agent provocateur was involved in that. Karenga was not there on that day, and to my knowledge, did not orchestrate that. So there's that. And then there's the case of Deborah Jones and Gail Davis. I have met Deborah Jones. I have spent time with Deborah Jones. I helped her to write her story. Yes. Deborah Jones and Gail Davis state that Maulana Karenga was responsible and had a direct hand in their torture. During Mother's Day 1970, Deborah Jones is the one who testified against Karenga, and he and Tia Moyo, his still current wife, were convicted along with two others. Karenga did 10 years in prison, was sentenced to 10 years and did 4. Now, going back to what I stated in the beginning, every December, it comes up around Kwanzaa because of the Panthers, John and Bunchy. And when we talk about the fact that, again, Karenga was not there, it was an agent provocateur who committed those murders, then people pivot to, well, he tortured 2 sisters. The sisters, Gail Davis and Deborah Jones, are always an afterthought to John and Bunchy. And I understand that because the brothers were murdered, but they're always an afterthought. And then people talk about, well, it was COINTELPRO against the Panthers and us, and now a peace treaty has been signed. And even my information on that came about shakily. But the point being is that Karenga becomes absolved because of some of this Panther stuff, but he is yet to admit to or atone for what he has done to Gail and Deborah. Therefore, going back to my original point, why this push? Why this support for Kwanzaa, for Nguzo Saba, if it is ancient and indigenous to African people, but we got it through this particular context of this man? Why don't we change it? Or why don't we change the name from Nguzo Saba? Why don't we? Why? And as opposed to going back to Tackwood and the Panthers again, can you tell me why?
I don't see the reason to do that, because he doesn't own Nguzo Saba.
Okay.
It's not his, to claim as his,
He says it
as
is.
his own.
He says he did it. He says he the one.
Absolutely.
It's promoted that way.
I'm not suggesting that he didn't. What I'm saying is that he doesn't own the knowledge. Who owns knowledge? Who owns words?
Okay.
Who owns concepts? He doesn't own those things.
He trying mighty hard though.
But that's part of the reason why we're doing our work. And it's because of these things, Sister Tandy, that we haven't gotten nearly as much out of these teachings as we should. Who does it? Again, when the question is, how does it help Black people? How does it help Black people for us to turn our back on these teachings because of things that happened 50, 60 years ago? For me, we had to address these questions in our organization when we decided the focus of our work. And we decided not to bear the burden of anything that he is responsible for that's negative.
Now, when you say our organization, what organization are you talking about?
The Afrikan Restoration Project, our organization.
Okay.
And to turn our back on these teachings because of his involvement with them hurts us. It doesn't hurt him. Why would we deny ourselves a connection to teachings that encourage us to be united, to practice self-determination, to practice collective work and responsibility? Cooperative economics, have a purpose, use our creativity, and have faith in ourselves first. What do we accomplish by turning our back on that? We don't have to embrace it and celebrate him. We have to give him credit, because if we don't give him due credit for his contribution to it, then we're committing a moral error that, is not equal to what he's being accused of, but it's a moral error nonetheless. So he's due credit for his contribution. And then I must say this too, Tandy. Everybody is due the opportunity to evolve, and this work that he's done after those events that you talked about are an indication of his evolution. I will say this without hesitation. Two things. One, we decided that he didn't need to be innocent of what he was charged of regarding Deborah Jones and the other sister whose name escapes me. Tell me her name again, please. I want to call her.
Gail Davis.
Gail Davis. He didn't have to be innocent of those charges for me to be willing to learn from him. I will say this: if there was an ongoing pattern of that type of behavior, then no way would I be engaged in anything that he's associated with. But part of that study that I told you that I did involved wrapping myself into the moment that brought those events forward, and I think that's what's missing a lot, almost all the time, from a conversation about these things. People pluck those events out of a much broader story and they focus on Karanga without giving due consideration to all of the things that were happening around and that even brought those things forward. And then the focus becomes the fact that, he hasn't apologized. Well, I can say this without hesitation. I don't think he's ever going to apologize.
Exactly.
He doesn't have an apology for that would contradict his self-perception, and going back even to then. And as much as I can agree that we all should make amends for any wrong we've done, certainly significant wrongs, he's not the person that's going to do that, and he should bear the burden for that. I shouldn't bear the burden for that. I shouldn't deny myself access to knowledge, because he made a mistake. There's no matter how and the teachings don't require me to do that. The teachings require me to look at him over the course of his whole life and to judge him on what his overall contribution is, to measure the mistakes against the successes. you know, and there's no disputing that he has 60 years of rigorous scholarship, you know, that has done great work. He's done great work to bring forward our teachings, to remind us of who we are, you know. He hasn't apologized for things that people think that he should apologize for, and he's regarded as, you know, having ego problems and all of those things. Well, the teachings don't tell me that it's my job to check his ego. The teachings tell me that it's my job to learn as much as I can, become the best possible version of myself, master myself, and become a better example of the teachings. So that's what we're trying to do, you know, understanding the context that brought all of those things forward helped me to remember that he wasn't the biggest villain in that story. There were forces that created a context for all of those things to happen. And what are those things that happen? They are what we can rightfully refer to as wartime atrocities, because that was a time of war, right, for us.
And that's usually women bear the brunt in war.
Absolutely. And that's why we have such contempt for people who create war, certainly unjust war, certainly the unjust war that was happening against us. So those people are the biggest villains, and we shouldn't lose sight of that, you know.
But, yeah, but, you know, every villain has a helper and an aider. Every villain has a helper. Unfortunately, some too willing. But okay.
I wanted to finish. I don't give him a pass for any mistakes that have been made, you know, or for any egregious acts, right? But I do my best to put them in their proper context and see the full circle, see the full story. I'm so glad you did that story with Deborah Jones, because I'm a first source type of person. I want to hear it from the people who were there. You know what I mean? So I was thankful that you assisted in bringing her story forward. But at the same time, the question becomes, how does that story help Black people today? And I'm certainly not saying that it doesn't. What I'm saying is that in order for us to get benefit from it, we have to engage that story in a certain context. And we have to be looking for the lessons in it. If we're just repeating that these things happen, and we're using knowledge of those things just to, you know, negatively impact somebody's reputation and all of that, well, then we're participating in the division that was intended when those people created those conditions for this stuff to happen in the first place. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to be forward in COINTELPRO here 60 years later. You know, we got to be thinking deeper than that. So that's why we're doing the work that we're doing. And that's why, you know, I say that these teachings have validity far beyond any of the controversies, real or imagined, and deserve to be brought forward and engaged regardless of those things.
And just going back real quick, when we talk about, for those who are listening, for those who've been watching from the beginning, Kwanzaa was created by several people, and many of those people have begun to talk about the fact that they were there. Maulana Karenga claims sole credit, and his current supporters promote that he is the sole founder of Kwanzaa. Kwanzaa was founded collectively, so it wasn't just him. To piggyback on what we've been saying, this is what. But let's pivot now, because.
Well, let me touch on that before.
We done talked about a lot, and there's more. We always going to talk about a lot, but I wanted to pivot for a moment. But go ahead and say what you wanted to say, and we'll come back.
I just wanted to say that that's part of our work too. You know, I don't know if you've been to the Kwanzaa.org website, and under the Kwanzaa creators section, we recognize 4 other people who assisted in the creation of the holiday, and 2 of them ambassadors for it. Yeah.
And one of those was the child who brought to the group, during this time period in 1965, where are the Black holidays? Why don't we have our own Black holidays? A 12-year-old child, a little girl. And actually, from that question, the study group was formed to find out about the various holidays, seasonal celebrations across the African continent.
What were you saying? Yes, Nate. She was actually 10 years old.
Okay, 10-year-old.
When she asked that question. And it's important to note that her name was Kinamo Damu. She was the younger daughter of three children from the Damu family. And she, in fact, did ask a question that led to a research committee being established at the US organization that Dr. Karenga organized. And they did the research as you mentioned. But it is important to note that while her asking the question did serve as the catalyst for that event, they had been having discussions about holidays, you know, and there even been a prior attempt at creating a holiday. So the notion that the 10-year-old girl didn't introduce the notion of, you know, creating a new holiday. She was just persistent enough in her concern about the prospect of not celebrating Christmas, that she was insistent enough that she prompted the adults to do the research that in fact led to Kwanzaa being created. So, and she is in fact one of the people we recognize.
Got you. Right. And her name now is still Kinamo.
Her legal name is Terry Bandale. But we refer to her as Kinamo, Kinamo, Damu, Damu. We refer to her as that because that's what she was known as, you know, at the time. You know.
Okay. So now, what I wanted to ask you though, and let me state also going back, you being from Detroit, and trust me, I know Detroit is different. When I first learned about Kwanzaa, I really don't think Karenga's name had been mentioned at all. And when I see people across the country, going back east, of course, and in the South that celebrate Kwanzaa, they usually don't include Karenga. And I think it has to do with the whole thing, not only of the sordidness, but again, it being something that is traditionally ours, predates, et cetera, and so on. But when I first learned about Kwanzaa, the concept of Ujamaa, I looked at some of the older literature from the 60s, and Ujamaa had been defined as cooperative economics and familyhood. And through the years, the whole familyhood aspect seemed to have been left off. And so we come to where we are today, the emphasis on quote unquote cooperative economics, or the phrase cooperative economics is put out there. And actually the definition of the Kwanzaa definition of Ujamaa, cooperative economics, to build and maintain our own stores and shops and businesses together and to profit from them. But it seems the emphasis on Black businesses and not so much cooperative, not so much co-ops, not so much socialistic. And that's not the fault of Kwanzaa. That's not the fault of the Nguzo Saba or the people who promote it, but it seems like that's what is promoted out there. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I happen to believe that of all 7 principles, Ujamaa is the one that we have performed most efficiently in over the course of 60 years that we've had the Nguzo Saba, the 7 principles, and to some extent, I do associate that with the way the teachings around Ujamaa are applied through Kwanzaa, because there is this ongoing effort to prevent the commercialization of Kwanzaa, you know, which for all practical purposes has failed. Although Kwanzaa isn't as grossly commercialized as Christmas is and some of the other holidays, you know, there still is a lot of commercialization of Kwanzaa out there. So the effort to stop that has failed. But and I think it has been misguided to an extent because it has been applied to the extreme where efforts to develop cooperative economics, larger scale cooperative economic efforts in the context of Kwanzaa have been stigmatized or discouraged, you know. And certainly we haven't, over the course of the 60 years of that we've had the 7 principles, we haven't developed ourselves. We haven't redeveloped, I would say, our own economy in a meaningful way. We're active participants in the dominant economy and everything. You know, that's not to say that we haven't tried before. I'm aware of the stories of the systems that we've built, the economic systems, communities that we've built and have been destroyed and all of that. But we got to keep coming back. And over the course of the 60 years that we've had Ujamaa as one of the principles of the Nguzo Saba, I don't think we've done nearly as much as we needed to do to develop around that principle and to provide, those businesses and those and certainly to your point, not just like an individual business where you have black capitalism, but a more collective type of program, type of economy. We certainly haven't developed that, and that's one of the things that we're trying to focus on in the course of our work, and we'll do more of that into next year. So I think that and even the part of the familyhood that you just mentioned, as you said it, I went through and thought where we might find that familyhood focus in the context of the 7 principles. And of course you find it in the first principle, unity. It's not explicitly stated, although it should be. Familyhood is central to anything that we're going to do, and certainly family is the foundation of community. So there should be some outward focus on familyhood in the context of that. So to that extent, we haven't done nearly what should be done in focusing on familyhood in the context of these teachings, but we should, and we most certainly should do more around cooperative economics in that as well.
I've been speaking with Shujaa Baker, a Detroit native, out here now in Los Angeles with me, a cultural historian, published author, and a design engineer. Also a small business owner with a product design and prototype manufacturing company called Virtual Design and Prototyping. His newest publication is Building on the Work of Our Elders and Ancestors, and he's got a children's series, Stemming Them and the 7 Principles. The Afrikan Restoration Project, of which you are a member, which is bringing forth this work as part of its charge. Is this similar to African Minds United? Or did it begin similar to African Minds United?
Well, we have some of the founding, well, I'll say this. The Afrikan Restoration Project emerged out of the Long Beach Study Group.
Okay, the Long Beach Study Group. Yeah. The reason why I'm asking for our audience, the Long Beach Study Group in Long Beach, California, which is a few miles south of Los Angeles. African Minds United was a study group here in South Los Angeles. These entities evolved during the mid to late 1990s, which a lot of us consider to be like a golden era in terms of the resurgence of interest in African history and learning and studying African history, in reclaiming Egypt, also known as Kemet, to our ancestors and connecting it to our heritage, our lineage as Black people. This is the time of Dr. John Henry Clark, Dr. Yosef Ben Yakinen, John G. Jackson, Ivan Van Sertima. It was the 90s was a golden era.
Yeah.
And so that's why I was asking if this organization has direct roots to that particular time period.
Absolutely. And I have to add this as an edit. The Long Beach Study Group actually got started in 1989. They got started after the I think it was the first ASCAC conference, Association for the Study of Classical African Civilization. They had a conference in Kemet,
Right,
and
right. Mm-hmm.
Dr. Yosef Ben Yochanan,
Yes.
he said to the participants, he gave them a charge to go home and start study groups,
Mm-hmm.
so that they could share this knowledge, because it was important to share this knowledge in the community, with people who might not have access to it in the academy. Um,
Right. Okay.
Olufemi Viltz was one of the people who was on that tour, and he came home, and with a couple other people, we have their names listed on our Afrikan Restoration Project website. They
Mm-hmm.
start they started the Long Beach Study Group, and when I came around in, I think 2005, yeah, was when I stumbled into my first meeting. They had been meeting since 1989, almost every Thursday night in Long Beach.
Mm-hmm.
So, and after I was around for a few years, the elders went on a vacation and asked Brother Kwesi Osafo to take over the study group, and Kwesi immediately called me. And in 2009, we began our period of running that group, and reorganized as the Afrikan Restoration Project, and added several things.
Okay, so 1989, which leads us into the 90s, also known as the golden era of this time of consciousness. So the Afrikan Restoration Project still around, still working. Do you have any events coming up that we need to know about?
Yes, indeed, we do. We have two events that we're involved in actively, directly, fully involved in for this Kwanzaa season. And there are a couple other events that we've supported, and I'll just focus on the two that we're actively involved in. The first is on Umoja Night, the first night of Kwanzaa, December 26th. That's happening in Detroit at the Charles Wright Museum. That is an event that's being sponsored by Al-Kibalan Village. Al-Kibalan Village is a community organization, African-centered community organization on the east side of Detroit, not far from where I grew up, that has a 50-year tradition of serving the community. They started as a martial arts academy, have taught tens of thousands of Black people martial arts through that organization. And they also manage the annual build and construction of the Motor City Canara. The world's largest Canara stands 30 feet tall,
Yeah.
in downtown Detroit. So we teamed up with Al-Kibalan Village for Umoja Night, and we are co-producing a children's play that's based on our Kwanzaa for Kids story, that addresses, that introduces, or is built around that original inspiration for the Kwanzaa holiday and the children who were involved. So we're looking forward to that, taking place on December 26th from 6 to 8 p.m. at the Charles H. Wright Museum in Detroit. And then we have our Kwanzaa event on Sunday, December the 28th, from 5 to 7 p.m. That's an online event that we're titling. Our theme this year is looking at Black people and the Nguzo Saba at 60, and how treating the 7 principles like a Black job could save the world, and that aligns with what we've been talking about today. We did an analysis of where Black people are today relative to each one of the principles, right? And that's where that conversation came up about the where we stand with Ujamaa, as we were talking about earlier. But as I mentioned earlier, we take the position that if we treat the 7 principles like a Black job, something that we're obligated to on a daily basis, then we will find ourselves becoming the best possible version of ourselves. And in doing so, we would inspire the same in others. And we take the position that the way to create a better world, the way to save the world, is to increase the number of good people in it, right? So if we become the best version of ourselves and inspire the same in others, and I have to say this to you in particular, Tandy, this ain't no soft type of, perspective on this. I'm not talking about that kumbaya type of thing where, we've been so nice that we've gotten run over. I'm not talking about that type of thing. I'm talking about that balanced, truly balanced, becoming the best version of ourselves where we're not being taken advantage of, and being our best and inspiring the same in others. That's how you create a good world. That's how you save the world. So that's the message that we'll be presenting there at that event. And people can go to our websites, Kwanzaa.org, Nguzo Saba 365.org, TARPIE, TARPIE stands for the Afrikan Restoration Project Inland Empire.org. Those sites will all have access info for our events and related details about the work that we're doing.
Shujaa Baker, thank you so much for being on Rootwork today.
And thank you so much for having me, Sister Tandy. You're one of my favorite people out there doing this work, sister. So it's a pleasure to be here with you.
Well, I appreciate your support, Baba. I truly do.
Yes, indeed.
All right, now. Microphone wasn't on, so y'all didn't hear me sigh. So I'll do it again. So that was an interview with Baba Shujaa Baker, who is an engineer and also a historian, cultural worker, and an author based out here in Los Angeles, California. So because he was traveling on the way to Detroit, we weren't able to do the show live. So unfortunately, you're not able to ask those of y'all who are in the chat, not able to ask him any questions now. But if you want to leave a question up for him in the chat, I will definitely let him know and he can get back to it later. So real quick, just wanted to go back and go through the chat real quick. Wow. I still don't understand why you naming yourself after a pasta sauce, but to each day own. Hey, Leah. Zakia Alake from Roxbury, Habaragani. Welcome, sister. Welcome, welcome. Hey, Veronica. I'm not sure if I've met you before, but okay. Hey, Terry. Hey, Keontae. Hello, Muhammad Imran Shafiq. You love the color. Talking about my room. I know. It's a nice purple. I figured since I got to spend all this money, I ain't going to just paint a white room. I'm going to enjoy myself. Yes, you can call me Seize the Way. I'll take that. Seize the way. Shout you out, Leah Walker. Hey, Leah Walker. How you doing? Purple like Prince. This room, which is now my office, this was my bedroom as a child. And as a young adult, I discovered Prince and I fell in love. For those of you who are old like me, then you remember when Prince first came out, that poster with that afro. I was like, oh my God. So yeah, my room is purple because of Prince. Absolutely, absolutely. Hey, hat lovers. Not familiar with you. Interesting name, but welcome. Glad to have you. Glad to have you. Happy Monday to you too. Thanks for coming through. We appreciate you. The one from BK, I'm going to assume BK is Brooklyn. Zinzabel, my sister. Peace, y'all, at 4:31 p.m. And the show started at 4. That's all I'm going to say about that. Toe Jam. Okay, all right. Hey, Toe Jam, nice to see you. Glad you're here. Events, I think that you may have been referring to the events. Were you referring to the events we were talking about? What led to why we calling this sordid history, the murders of John and Bunchy on the campus of UCLA by agent provocateurs within the US organization, and the torture of Gail Davis and Deborah Jones by members of the US organization, including Maulana Karenga and his wife, Tia Moyo. That's what they were convicted of. So are those the events you're talking about? Were those the events we're talking about? I guess that's the question I want to ask. This is okay. I think it's a luxury to say he, meaning Karinga, should be looked at over the arc of his life and his contributions now. How can he speak authoritatively on Ma'at and yet not take accountability for egregious wrongs? He, meaning Maulana Karinga, and that is the question most people want to know. Amin Kenu Batu Amin? Did I say that correctly? I know I ain't seen you before. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the show. Am I pronouncing this correctly? Uakata? Excuse me. Ujima Collective Work and Responsibility. This means we are responsible for our community, meaning if someone acts up, we all take responsibility for that. That's what I thought. Eh. But yeah, welcome to the show. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Let's see. Any new? Hey, Tony, I ain't seen you in a minute. How are you doing? Thank you. This is the finest African attire, Chinese made African attire that I could afford. Now, Nathaniel Dett wrote a musical version of the Nguzo Saba. You discovered that on Apple Music. Not sure if the entire recording is on YouTube Music. First of all, welcome, Vernon Nickerson, school coach. Not familiar with you, so welcome to the show. That name, Nathaniel Dett, if I remember my Black history correctly, that was the name of a Black composer. But to my knowledge, I'll just have to check it out on Apple Music, unless you're talking about someone from today who has taken on that name, taken on the name of Nathaniel Dett in honor, maybe, of this historical person, or maybe it is their actual name. I don't know. I came across a brother on Instagram. His screen name is Jupiter Hammond. I was like, whoa, Jupiter Hammond was hanging out with Phyllis Wheatley back in the day. So yeah, I am. Oh, your personality is magically delicious. Isn't that Lucky Charms, not Rao's pasta sauce? But anyway. Let's see. I'm just trying to run through these. Thanks for all the work you do. The shows have been great. The Kali Akuno series kept me sane and grounded. Thank you. Well, thank you for tuning in. We really appreciate that. And as Brother Kali has said, we want to be able to engage with you. If you've got questions, concerns, comments regarding the Build and Fight series, please go to either Jackson Rising here on YouTube or here on Black Liberation Media and check for the playlist, the Build and Fight series. Over 11 months, going through various topics of the Build and Fight series. And we started in February. Yeah, started in February. The Trump regime had barely been in office 1 month. And we talked about was economic collapse on the horizon. Exactly what was Trump attempting to do with the announcement in January of these tariffs? Was he trying to intentionally wreck the economy? That was a very popular show, and it led us into our Build and Fight series. So please, when you get a chance, if you haven't checked out the Build and Fight series here on Black Liberation Media or on Jackson Rising, Cooperation Jackson's YouTube channel, go back and check it or go back and refresh yourselves. All right. So that's all I am seeing. It is 5:06. You know, I don't like to do a whole lot of mouth running while I'm up here. Mr. Arthritis, he's in the vicinity. He's not knocking on the door just yet. Is there anything else? Anything else? Anybody want to talk to? Anybody want to say? Anybody want to talk about? Let me do this real quick while I got y'all here. Because I don't always I don't always um, do shameless self promotion, but I'm gonna do it now since we're on this subject, or kind of, sort of, since we're on this subject. Who is this? Is that Amazon? I wasn't trying to do Amazon. I wasn't trying to do Amazon, but I'm gonna do this. Let me do this real quick. This is what we stood for. What we stood for: the story of a revolutionary black woman by Deborah Jones with my assistance. This is the book, Deborah Jones telling her story of how she and Gail Davis were tortured over the Mother's Day weekend, 3 days, 1970, by members of the US organization under the direction of Maulana Karenga. It's supposed to be memoir, but we included aspects. It says memoir, but it's actually more autobiographical. But one of the things that I noticed over the years is that people would attack Kwanzaa by saying, well, Karenga, because they hate Karenga, they're attacking Kwanzaa. And one of the ways they do that, well, he tortured them sisters, but they never mention those sisters' name. Who are these sisters? Are they still alive? What are they doing now? What are they talking about? What are they thinking about? And it was Scott Brown's book, Fighting for Us, which came out either in 2003 or 2025, which looked at the philosophy of the US organization and the rank and file members, their day-to-day work, how they believed, how they interpreted and internalized the work that they were doing here in Los Angeles in particular. It wasn't until that book that I learned the names of those quote unquote two sisters, Gail Davis and Deborah Jones. And it was several years after that, as part of an oral history project at California State University Northridge, that the people I was working with there were told that they needed to interview Deborah Jones. They said, well, who is that? Well, that's the sister that testified against Karenga. She's still alive? She's around? Yeah, she go to the Slauson picnic every year. We talked in the interview with Shujaa about the film Bastards of the Party. And if you've studied or come across any history of the Black Panther Party in Los Angeles, you know that the Slausons were a quote unquote street gang during the 60s, led by one of their subsets was led by Bunchy Carter. And he attempted to move the members of that subset into the Southern California chapter of the Black Panther Party. So every year the Slausons gather and have a day at I think it's at South Park here in South LA. And so one of the people we were interviewing, a brother by the name of Kumasi, said, well, yeah, Deborah, she go to the Slauson gathering every year. He put us in touch with Deborah Jones and brought her in, did an oral history with her. And I wasn't there when her oral history was being done, but I was told two people who interviewed her, it was those two people and Deborah, not a dry eye in that session. And one of the interviewers was a man, not a dry eye. And after that oral history interview, the spark was planted and said, this needs to be a book. We know a person who is a writer, who has written a book. We're going to put you in touch with them. And that's how I got the call to meet with Deborah. And the result of that is this book, which is awfully puny on the screen. I got to figure out a way to, as I told y'all earlier, I'm working on it, y'all. I'm trying to get it together. I promise y'all, I'm trying to get it together. Bring you a quality product in addition to quality information. So yeah, this is the cover of the book, What We Stood For, Story of a Revolutionary Black Woman, Deborah Jones with my assistance. Now, here's the thing. Read an article in Bar, that's Black Agenda Report that mentioned Karinga played a role in the murder of a BPP member in San Diego. You know, Shujaa mentioned the fact that the US organization and the San Diego chapter of the Black Panther Party came to an agreement, reached a truce, signed a peace treaty. See, my thing is, I don't know how much of a direct involvement. I haven't seen anything that says direct involvement in murders of Panthers by Karinga. What do I mean by that? Meaning that in the tons of books that have been written on Malcolm X and the Nation of Islam, we have people who say, I was in the room when Herbert Muhammad said, cut out Malcolm's tongue and send it to the messenger. Herbert Muhammad being one of the sons of Elijah Muhammad. I was in the room when Elijah Muhammad said X, Y, and Z. Or I was in the room when Minister Farrakhan was writing his editorial saying that Malcolm was worthy of death. I have yet to come across anything where Maulana Karinga or anyone close to him says he said, we need to kill all of these Panthers. One of the first books I read was Agents of Repression. One of the first books I read on this subject. Agents of Repression, and then COINTELPRO papers, Jim Vanderwall and Ward Churchill, and they had copies of the FBI generated drawings that were sent to Panthers and US members. And who was it? Was it Elaine Brown? Maybe it was Kathleen. I don't know if it was Elaine Brown, Kathleen Cleaver, or Erica Huggins. It was one of the sisters in the Panthers. It was not Assata Shakur. But I remember listening to an interview of her saying, we knew the FBI was sending that because it was so crude. It's like, we knew it was them. So, but at any rate. Am I pronouncing this correctly? Never mind. I used to be able to pronounce stuff. That's not a click, is it? Ndlela, is that how your name is pronounced? You're looking that up now. Yes, please look it up. We want you to fact check and verify the information that we put out here on Black Liberation Media, unlike some other channels that I ain't gonna mention. But at any rate, okay, I did pronounce it correctly. Good. All right, I got 5:15. I asked y'all specifically if you had any questions or comments. It's real quiet over here in the chat. Hold on. Hey, sorry about that. I didn't see you earlier. Queen of the Burbs, not familiar with you. Thank you so much for tuning in. Welcome to the show. What y'all laughing at? Both of y'all laughing. Why y'all laughing? So look, awfully quiet over there. Obviously, y'all ain't got nothing to say. So I'm going to let you go. And I'm going to go on back and get into something over here in my house. And I'm going to let y'all finish and go ahead on and do what it is you need to do. Now, here's hey, Seventh Son. Seventh Son, you know, when I saw you commented a couple of shows back, I said, I wonder if it's that same brother. And I talked to our brother Akil, and he said, yep, that's the same brother. So greetings to you. For those of you who either celebrate these European holidays, or for those of you like me who grew up being conditioned to celebrate these holidays, and now you don't, but you don't necessarily have people around you, because that's what we would do. Everybody would come from different areas of the country, whether they were in school or working a job, and they congregate at your mama's house, and we all here for the holidays. So if you're out there with none to do, I hope that you have a peaceful, a restful few days coming up. Please keep yourself safe. It's rough out there. It's rough out there in them real streets, and it's rough out here in these internet streets. Keep yourself safe. Take some time to rest and rejuvenate yourselves. And for those of you who do participate, Kwanzaa is coming up on the 26th, and then the Gregorian New Year on January 1st. I'm gonna stall y'all out. I'm gonna stall y'all out. No, but seriously though, seriously, you all take care of yourselves. Stay safe. I will holler at y'all later. You are very, very welcome. You are very, very welcome. Again, thank you so much for hanging with me. Don't forget, like, share, subscribe, and if you can, hit that donation button. Support Black Liberation Media. My understanding is you can become members again. Become a member of this project, of this experiment that we are doing, that we are working on. All right. Say it for Tony, Terry, and Layla. Is that a dub? Peace. Thank you so much, Leah. Although I don't know why you adding an E to my name. You ain't never seen me say Thandie. It's Thandi. I know it's the thought that counts. I appreciate you just the same. You know I gotta mess with y'all. I got to mess with y'all. All right, y'all. Take care. Peace.